Welcome to Food for Thought. I started a new podcast called Mining for Wakey, which I do with the panel of guests from the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server. Here they are. And, as you do, sometimes you have a conversation and you feel like you didn't get off all the points you wanted to bring across, and you feel like you didn't speak everything you wanted to speak about. So Valeria and Gilad continued the conversation a couple days later, and they gave me the footage. So enjoy.
About relevant realization, what I understood, and I'm not sure, and I want to kind of get, because it seems like you also have a better idea about it. So what I thought relevant realization was, by what I heard from John, is something like natural selection, in the sense that it does this variation and selection. And then recursive relevance realization is the fact that you can look at that process, and that process becomes an object of attention that you can vary and select over, and then you can optimize it and say, oh, maybe I'm not doing this process correctly, right? Maybe I'm looking at the wrong things, I'm seeing the wrong things. And then you can look at that process of looking at relevance realization and you say, oh, maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, and so on and forth. And so that's what I thought the connection was between relevance realization and recursive relevance realization. Is that right, or am I missing something?
Let's backtrack. So the things that I think I know about relevance realization. When John talks, the main thing of relevance realization is that intelligence of a cognitive agency happens by ignoring most of the things and zeroing in on the relevant information. So I think that what relevance realization is the process by which cognitive agents, or the capacity, or the process, or the machinery through which cognitive agents ignore most of the information in the world and somehow magically zeroing on the relevant information. Now, how does the magic happen? The magic happens by evolving the fittedness of the sensory motor loops, and then complexifying the system more and more until we have the higher and higher levels of cognitive functions and abstractions and representations of things. So, and
that was like,
yeah,
when we're saying evolving the system of the sensory motor loops, I'm trying to concretize it and say, like, so let's say I'm in the middle, like I haven't just been created, I'm something, and if I understand John correctly, I'm doing relevance realization right now.
Yeah.
Single moment.
Yes. Otherwise, you could not use language, for example.
Yeah. So my maybe misleading analogy is like, there's already a certain predisposition, right? I'm at a certain point where I'm already looking at some things and seeing them as relevant. And let's say maybe I have some habits of seeing certain things as relevant. Maybe those habits may change, like John says, in relation to the state that I'm in. Like if I'm thirsty, I'm looking at the world thirstily.
That's the perspective here.
Yeah. And those things change, like what the salience landscape would be. So what I thought relevance realization means is, like, I have this state, and then I do this, and contract it. And this, and in that way, like what I am and what I'm looking at sort of moves through through time and through what's relevant, because like I expand, I see, oh, look at this table, there are interesting patterns, and then I say, that's not relevant now. Look at the conversation, think about words and stuff.
So the way I understand it, that is the how, not the what.
That is the how, not the what.
The how relevance realization evolves and works, not the what the relevance realization is. I might be wrong on that one, but that's the way I understand it.
So what is the what?
I think the what, it's just the simple thing of ignoring most of the world and focusing.
You said simple there. I'm already suspicious.
Well, I mean, it's the how is not simple. The what is simple.
Okay, so you're saying relevance realization is, regardless of how it happens, is that thing we do, which is ignoring stuff, most stuff.
It's magically focusing in on what is important, what is relevant. And how does the magic happens? That's like 20 hours of the awakening from the meaning crisis. Maybe a little bit less, but there's like at least 10 hours talking about how does the process works, how does the process evolves, what is involved, what is not involved. But I think when he's talking about relevance realization, he's talking about the process of zeroing in on what is relevant and ignoring the rest. I think. What do you think of that?
I think we're on the same page or close. I'm not sure exactly where we differ, because like I agree that we can sort of have a black box approach and say, here's a thing that happens, and I'll tell you what it is. It's us ignoring stuff, most stuff, the vast majority of stuff, instead of computing them. And if I don't tell you how it happens, then you can pretend it's magic, right? And that's what that's the what, right? It's some black box that we can take 20 hours to explain, that does the act of ignoring almost everything and zeroing in on some relevant information.
Let's start from another point, and the point is, what is intelligence? How does cognitive agents have the agency that defines them as cognitive agents? What is the key component of it? And the key component of the intelligence of the cognitive agents is the capacity to ignore everything else that is irrelevant and focus on what is relevant. It's their capacity for doing relevance realization. I think that's what he means by the term. Now, and then he goes on to explain all the different levels at which we are doing that. We are doing that at basic perception levels. We are doing that at higher levels of, where we could identify cognitive biases. For example, confirmation bias is an example in which that it's not so adaptive sometimes. And all the levels in between. We are doing that when we are doing language. We are doing that with when we are placing our attention. We are doing that when we are regulating our arousal. Are we doing that? Well, yeah, maybe. I would have to think. But you get the picture, I think, right?
Yeah, I think I do. Have you ever had a case where you were talking to someone who didn't know about Vervaeke and his work, and you the term relevance realization help to communicate with someone who's not already well versed in Vervaekenisms?
So one thing that I have been thinking about it is that, and I've been thinking a lot about that since we started the series. There's this idea of looking at and looking through. My ultimate goal is to look through Vervaeken, look through the Vervaekenisms in order to understand aspects of reality that we have not looked at because our cognitive grammar deemed them unimportant. For example, the relationship between the subjective and the objective that John talks about, the transjective, the non-dual space from which both emerge. And several are the fact that we're ignoring most of the information, or the fact that we cannot be comprehensively logic, or there are many other things that if you look deeply, the Buddhists are saying that in different words, but they are using some metaphysics that I do not necessarily know how to subscribe to at some moment. So what I appreciate a lot about the work that John has done is that he has combined these insights about the mind offered by the cognitive science, offered by the religions, offered by wisdom traditions in one language. So ultimately, what I think that we need to do is to be able to look through those things at the thing that he is talking about. Now, one thing that I worry when I think about that is that we might end up using the words that he employs and might even get some kind of coherence or consensus among a group and think that we understand. But the consensus, or what the thing that we understand, even if it's a real thing that we are talking about and an important thing, but it's not the same thing that John is talking about. And now we have created some kind of equivocation here where we are using the same words and thinking that we are talking about the same thing when we're talking about different things. In that case, we might need to step back and look at the concept to just make sure that we are using the concept in the same way that John is using the concept. Look at how we are using it, look at how John is using it, and kind of try to be on the same page with the concept.
I think I'm with you with that concern for sure. I have a kind of different angle towards it, which is, I think transjectivity, for instance, is a great Vervaekenism, and I think it's useful. And I've had chances where I've spoken to people outside of this little corner, and it helped explain. So one example is, if anyone's read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, I think what Robert M. Pirsig is trying to reach for there is transjectivity. He calls it quality, but he talks about, like, is this objective or subjective? And he has a whole thing about, like, the horns of the dilemma, or why it's this or that. And then, like, his description of what he calls quality is really close to what John describes with transjectivity. And I think John does a really good job at making that term sort of like a flashlight that lights up a lot of things, and like you can really see the world it's a
good lens.
Yeah, through that lens. And to me, like, that's a really decent reality check when you go outside of like, let's say, the group that's already bought in. Like when you know that it's not just like preaching to the choir or something like that, and you can actually utilize it. And John has a lot of terms, like you were saying, that we can't be exhaustively logical. We can't compute our way through the world. You know, all of these things are really interesting and important. And, like, I think even more so, a lot of terms from the first half of the series, like, you know, parasitic processing, reciprocal narrowing, the having and the being mode, or carrying from the existential modes, that is. All of those things I found myself really able to sort of be in a situation, see how that term relates, and communicate that to a person who's not familiar with those terms. And specifically with relevance realization, that's a point where I think like that's the term that I struggle with the most, because like it seems to me it's necessary for the, let's say, cohesion or completeness of John's work, right? There's something in the middle there that needs to be filled, but then, you know, it's kind of like that part of a mathematical proof that is really important for the rigor, but you know, like when you're a physicist or something, like you don't bother reading it. It's the technical.
That's how you guys do it.
Yeah. Like basically, you need to know the important stuff around it, and then like you trust the mathematicians that they did all of the, you know, let epsilon greater than 0. Like we stop reading once that happens. So yeah, that was also my sense to a degree in the stream, that we're only holding the looking at the concept, and I haven't found in my experience so far, I think even within this corner, a situation where I wanted to talk about something like some real situation, and I needed like, oh, I need relevance realization to explain this, or to get to the depths of that or something.
So the fact that we are just ignoring stuff, isn't that a useful word to describe that?
The fact that we're just ignoring most of the things, I think combinatorial explosion is extremely important. Like you can't compute your way out of that. Sure, like the fact that you don't explore the space, sure, is work like the episode that we've talked about problem formulation and all of those things, absolutely.
And what is the way out of combinatorial explosion? How do we deal with combinatorial explosion as cognitive agents?
Well, you know, I get like what we're doing is relevance realization. I get that it's like,
but you still don't feel the need for the concept. Yeah,
I mean, because again, when I talk to someone, I'm saying like, yeah, but you're not exploring all the options, right? You're actually ignoring most things, and what I would say is like, because in this, like some of his work that he presented on AI in the series is relevant to that. Let me recall just what I mean. So, like the fact that you have all of these heuristics and biases, right? That's, for me, indecent in most cases to say like how you avoid combinatorial explosion. Saying like, okay, well, I have to rely on all of these heuristics, because I can't explore the possibility space. And then like I have not been in a case where, you know, saying that was not enough for people, and they really needed, you know, the mechanism by which you do that.
So if I hear you correctly, and I might I'm undecided if I disagree. I might agree. So heuristics and biases would be an enough word.
I mean, they're not replacing relevance realization. They're like a level distant from it, right? Because to say, how do you deal with combinatorial explosion with the fact that you can't be comprehensively logical? Basically, what you do is you rely on heuristics and biases. And like I say, okay, what's beneath that? Then you need a theory, that is much deeper and much more into the cognitive science sort of rigorous technical language, which John's work seems impressive, but I'm not a cognitive scientist, and I really wouldn't know. I would need to really read up on the literature to say like how that is compared to other frameworks of thinking about these things. And again, from John's videos, it seems like he's connecting into a lot of frameworks, but for obvious reasons, I can't rely on John to tell me how important his work is, because he inevitably has a bias in that sense. But that's not related. The point is, like, I don't think when I would talk to people, they would really be concerned about relevance realization. I think even when they are, I think deep continuity would still be a better approach, right? Because he's saying like, but how do we do that? Well, there's the theory of deep continuity, which is what happens in evolution, right? Happens in like an evolution inside of our mind, right? Or if we're talking about AI, is what John says would happen for the evolution of AI, AGI. So the additional thing is, what I have found is that it's the term, to me, it's the most complicated term in Vervaeke land, right? And the most widely used, I think widely abused, I should say.
Yeah, definitely.
Because people are constantly saying it in ways that, like, despite my limited knowledge of it, are not consistent with what John is saying.
I agree.
And like that's also a hint to me that like maybe better like to lay off of the really complicated ones, because they get the most mystified. I think like it's also something that happens in other sciences, right? You don't see a lot of people talking about statistical or like thermodynamic healing, but they do talk about quantum healing, because quantum is really easy to mystify, right? Because it's complicated. But there's a lot of reasons why that is absolutely inconsistent with the science, and people can get away with it because it's so deep, and no one can really kind of give you an elevator pitch on why quantum theory behaves the way it does.
So your suggestion is to, what I hear you saying is that quantum physics, is that relevance realization is a useful concept in John's work, into what he has tried to do in the rigorous cognitive science part of it. But in popularizing it, it's not necessarily something that is going to be of much use.
Yeah, I mean, I think it even it's even shown when you see his Voices with Vervaeke and other talks that he had. I think of all of the talks I've seen him do, the only one when relevance realization really came up from the participants was with DC Schindler in their third talk, right? And to me, like that's pretty much where that is reasonable, like to weigh in, right? Because it's such a deep thing in the rigor of the very core of his work, where most of the contact with reality, like most of reality that you experience has nothing to do with quantum mechanics, and it's really unreasonable to talk.
Isn't everything like a quantum field? Aren't we living in a
Aren't we? But that's my point. Like, you don't need any of that to understand all of your own experience. You can start talking about it that way, which would mystify your own experience rather than help you come to better contact with it. Like, vacuum fluctuations and the Casimir effect are really cool, and have really negligible effect on your life and your experience. Whereas, you know, the video I showed you of a slinky, you know, the fact that the bottom of the slinky doesn't fall down until all of the slinky gets to it is something you can really have, you know, you can see it in your own life. You can get actual insights to the way that physical processes work. But it's not so fun because we know about it and we can explain it and we can understand it, right? So I feel like there's some temptation with the harder and kind of deeper terms to mystify, and because they're kind of a catch-all for the people who are not really deep in the field.
I think the attraction with quantum mechanics, quantum physics in general, it might be related to science having hit a hard wall on a lot of the things that we took for granted. Because if you take like physics to be the ultimate contact with reality, which is a lot of what I don't know, the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment mentality is like science will have all the answers, and that's where the answers are, is in the objective facts of physics. And then you go there to the physics and you discover that, well, a lot of the things that we wanted to get to the bottom of, the bottom is fuzzy. So I think part of the attraction comes from the hard science having like gone soft and fuzzy on you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that.
Thank you, Gilad and Valeria. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This conversation isn't over. I will show you the second half in the next Food for Thought. Stay tuned. Bye.
If there's a real shortage in you know, things in this little corner, short and concise content where we talk, when, like, for instance, if we talk only about relevant
Trying to find a button.
addendum, short and sweet, like take a bit of highlights, but I know it's work to edit stuff. So, and I don't have time. All I'm saying is, like, this little corner is full of 3-hour-long discussions and very lacking in 5-minute concise, like edited, crafted videos.